Well, good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see some familiar faces here today. We wanted to say welcome to the PBIS Leaders Network, and this has become one of our favorite mornings of the month when we get to connect with all of you and hear updates and just hear all the great work that's going on, along with just giving you the opportunity to share with each other. We've always said the strength of people coming together is that you share your stories and what you've learned, and then it helps others. So we're excited to have you all here today. We also just wanted to take time and say welcome to Stephanie Martinez. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephanie. Many of you will recognize Stephanie from University of South Florida and all the work she does with PBIS Center. Many of you attended the PD when Stephanie was actually here back when we used to meet in person and live, and we loved having her here. And then Stephanie also joined Heidi on one of our podcasts for just great information around PBIS and virtual connections. And so we're so glad to have you here, Stephanie. Thanks for joining us. All right, so as we move forward today, we do have a bit.ly available. And if you follow the link on the screen, you can follow along in the bit.ly. That way you can access any live links that we share throughout the morning. So again, we have that bit.ly available. And then today, our agenda, we have just a few things to address. The first one is we are going to take some time just to look at recognition and some updates that we've received regarding if you're going to apply for recognition this year. Then our main focus today is district level PBIS implementation. And we really wanted to share what does that look like? What does that mean? And then we also have 2 districts that have engaged in this process, and we're going to have them share out a little bit about that process. Then we're going to share just a few more updates from our team, and we will wrap up with time for networking. Like I said, that's one of our main reasons for having this time together, is so that you all can share what's working, what's not, and what questions do you have. So as you know, throughout this past year, as we've approached a year in this pandemic, one of the things that we really have focused on is self-care. And we just wanted to take time again today just to show you an example of how you can have a matrix that engages some of these ideas around self-care. But we also just wanted to challenge you. What is something that you might need to attend to today? You can see that the expectations of self-care on this sample matrix are be safe, be engaged, and be respectful. And just go ahead and take a second to read through those and see if there's something that you think, you know what, I do need to take care of that today. I recently have heard 2 different, one psychologist and one counselor, talking about the small things are the little things that add up to be the big things. And just some of those small things like, you know, are you getting a chance to get outside and walk? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating food that your body actually needs? So just considering even some of those small things really do have a big impact on your life. So as you take time and just think of that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Michelle Smith to talk about our PBIS state recognition.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of your faces. So I know Heidi and Stephanie spent a lot of time focused on the changes to state recognition at the February meeting. Within the last week, we did receive the official application and information to support recognition for the 2021 school year. And we wanted to go over some of those changes with all of you this morning. So there are 2 paths this year to achieve state recognition for PBIS implementation. The first path is if you are a building that has applied for recognition in the past and you're not looking to move up a level. The second path is if you are a new building looking to apply for recognition, or you're looking to increase the level of recognition within your building. So we'll start with those that are just looking to renew and stay at the same level of recognition that they were last year. If you're a building looking to do that, you will be required to fill out the application. There is a live link within your slides there that you can access that application. You'll also be required to complete an impact statement. And that is one piece that looks a little bit different from years past. In the past, you've been asked to talk about and share data that has shown the impact that PBIS has had across your building. This year, they are looking for a couple of different pieces that really relate to what buildings have been going through over the course of the last year. So the first question you'll be asked within that impact statement is to talk about how you have adapted the framework to meet the needs of families, children, and your staff with the pandemic that's happened over the course of the last year. And then the second question is going to ask for what your plans look like to increase and to reboot your PBIS framework as you move into next year. So that piece looks a little bit different from years past. The third piece that's going to be required is a digital photo of your leadership team. So this is just a selfie, a photo of everyone within your team that will be submitted with your application. And then the last piece that is required is the school profile template. That template can be found in the last 3 pages of that application. And that's really looking, as it has in years past, at your building demographics, as well as past TFI scores that you've completed within your building. The TFI is strongly encouraged. It is not required if you are looking to renew past levels of implementation, but we really strongly encourage it. It's so important for your teams to stay on top of where implementation's at in your building, as well as to use those scores to guide your action plan for next steps as you move into next year. All right, so looking at the second path, so that's for renewal. If you were bronze last year, you're looking for bronze this year, that's the path you'll go on. The second path is if you're looking to increase, so you were bronze last year, you're looking at silver next year, or you were silver and are looking for gold. Everything that I just went through on the renewal slide applies, plus the TFI is required. So that needs to be scored, the walkthrough should be completed. As well as supporting evidence is required. So if you're renewing, you would go down, fill out the application. It is not a requirement to attach that updated TFI or the supporting evidence. If you're looking to increase to the next level, that supporting evidence is required to be attached, as well as an updated TFI score. And all of that is due by May 1st. That supporting evidence can come in the form of paper copy. In the past, many have submitted binders, but we also have many buildings that will submit through Google or an electronic version to keep their evidence organized. So whichever format best works for your building is absolutely fine for submission. All right, so where should you start? You'll see on this slide, there is a link to a how-to video to get you started in working through that application. There's also quite a few of live links on this slide that will help if you have questions as you start working through this application. There's an FAQ on the recognition process. There's also scoring rubrics that we at the SST are required to complete to give you feedback on your evidence that you submit. There's also some evidence binder tabs that you're welcome to use. If you need to complete that TFI remotely, there's some really nice tools there for you to complete that remotely. And then the last link has some really nice tools and resources in using the TFI, scoring the TFI, completing that piece remotely for your team to use. All right. Any questions? Stephanie, Heidi, Stacy, did I miss anything?
I think you did a beautiful job, but I think to pause here in case there are any questions, we didn't put a prompting slide in there. but we'll just pause before we move on. Any questions about recognition? I know Stephanie is managing the chat, or you can unmute if you'd like. Give it a minute. Okay, well, if there is, as we go on, you can always populate the chat. We can also stay on a couple minutes after. If anybody has questions or has a specific question about your circumstance or your building, we can address that. Thanks, Michelle.
Absolutely.
Oop. So we don't want to play that.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're
Okay, we did have a prompting slide for questions. How about that? Any questions? I guess not. Okay, so probably what you came here for today is we're going to try to start a discussion on district level PBIS implementation. And we're going to talk just a little bit about MTSS connections to that. The state of Ohio is really encouraging and pushing PBIS at the district level. They're finding in the research and in practice that district level PBIS is much more sustainable than just individual buildings doing the framework. And so we wanted to give you some information about that this morning. And then we're going to talk a little bit about MTSS connections. So we know that with district level PBIS implementation, it's really important that you have a district level team. And that district level team does coordinate all of the efforts of your PBIS framework. A lot of their work does come in with securing funding, being visible, and creating almost like a PR kind of a situation, and political support for the process. So it's really important for that team to have visibility for your framework. That does help with sustainability. Also, it allows for coaching supports of the building, and they do that building, that leadership team does help coordinate the coaching efforts for that local implementation, the team training that goes on in the buildings for the school-wide PBIS, as well as helping evaluate what's happening in the buildings using tools like the TFI or the SAS, the self-assessment survey. We also know this last bullet is something that we're seeing in the state, but not so much on the local level, and that is using individual buildings as demonstration sites. Now, you could talk to Stacy and Michelle about demonstration sites statewide, because they're very involved with the early learning demonstration sites in the state of Ohio and how they are implementing, and then they're kind of showing what they're doing to other folks. But when you're looking at district-wide leadership team, that is something that they do coordinate and use their individual buildings to be able to show that, that implementation at that local level. So that's something that we haven't really trained or we haven't really talked about before, but it's really important that if you're looking at a district-wide team, that is something that they coordinate and help with. So this is a graphic from PBIS.org that I think really shows what this looks like in an organized fashion. So if you're looking at that top row of blue boxes there, it is about the leadership team adequately and sustaining, they're really adequately and funding and sustaining that funding at the district level. That visibility is also there in that top level of boxes, and then political support. And then we also see that workforce capacity, and that really means, do you have people in the right places to be able to get that framework up and running in your buildings? The other things that the district team does and helps with would be that training. And that's not just training for the startup of PBIS, but ongoing training and coaching, which is the next box, that they do provide for the buildings in the district. So they are responsible for that. The other thing that they are responsible for, again, is that evaluation piece. Are we conducting TFIs? Are we doing SASs to see what's happening in the buildings? And then we're going to talk about another tool that the district can use as far as evaluating what's happening. And then finally, that coordination of effort about effective implementation. And it requires that coordination of materials, time, personnel, and an action plan that you're going to use to help implement your practices. So I really do like this. There is a link there to the PBIS implementation blueprint, which is a much deeper dive into what should be happening at the district level, as well as at the building level. And that is a live link if you'd like to use that as far as a resource is concerned. But this is just kind of a quick, overview of what should be happening at the district level for your PBIS framework. So I mentioned a tool that you can use. It's kind of brand new. It is called the District Systems Fidelity Inventory, or DSFI for short. This is something that can help your district start up that action planning and progress monitoring and evaluation of fidelity. Right now in Ohio, we have a pilot going on with several districts that are piloting this tool for the state of Ohio. Unfortunately, we do not have any in Region 8 that are doing that. I'm hoping next year, if you guys are sitting on this call today, if you're interested, would love to engage with some of the districts in piloting next year. They're going to be looking for districts. But the District Systems Fidelity Inventory is quite a deep tool that you use to look at your district-wide practices. It is something that we've linked there if you'd like to take a look at what the questions are. I would say if you're thinking about the TFI for a building, this is kind of like a TFI for the district, except it's pretty much, well, if you do the whole tool, the TFI is pretty deep. If you're doing all three levels, all three tiers, this is a pretty deep dive into what leadership teams should look at. So when I'm sitting on some of these calls, they are saying that if you want to just attack maybe a part of the tool, that's somewhere that you might want to start. You don't have to necessarily do the whole tool at first, because if you do open it up and look at it, it's quite intimidating. But I think there are sections that you could look at to start work at the district level. So again, if any of you are interested, next year we're going to be looking for districts to be piloting this tool. And so you can reach out to Stephanie or I or Stacy or Michelle about looking at maybe starting to use the DSFI. And it is a good tool, but it can be overwhelming. So when you look at it, kind of look at it with that thought in your mind. So the other thing we kind of wanted to kind of talk to you guys about today is the connection to academics. And so what we're seeing in our region and statewide, the need for multi-tiered systems of support work. And that is really not doing PBIS in isolation or literacy in isolation or other academic areas in isolation. It's really, how do we bring these two systems together? And it's something that takes a lot of work. For those of you who have been working in PBIS, know that it takes several years to get the framework up and going. If you're talking about layering in academics, that's going to take time too. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to share with you today, and the team wanted to share with the region today about pairing your academic and your behavioral supports. First of all, we know that when you integrate those supports, it leads to better outcomes. There's a lot of research that shows if you implement PBIS and the RTI side of the triangle together, we see better outcomes. We also know that the importance of reading skills and social competence together, if they are not getting support in both of those areas, or if they have issues in both of those areas, that puts those kids at a higher risk later on for poor outcomes, and that's academically and behaviorally. So we know that we want to pair those. We also know that if students have an issue in one area, either let's say reading or behavior, it can predict future problems in that other area. So if a child has issues in reading, it could predict future behavioral issues later on, and vice versa. So we want to really attack both of these systems kind of together. The one bit of research that I'm going to kind of read to you, because I want to get it right, that I found to be completely interesting and impactful, is research that came out of McIntosh and others. And it looked at students taking the Dibbles assessment, specifically looking at the phoneme segmentation fluency part of that assessment. And it indicated when kids scored at low risk for reading problems, they had an 18% chance of receiving 2 or more office discipline referrals. So that shows that predictive nature of that. If students scored in the some risk range, which is a little bit higher, they had, which is a little bit lower, excuse me, they had a 25% chance of having multiple behavioral referrals. And then if students scored at the at-risk range, which is a little bit lower yet, they had a 33% chance of having discipline referrals. And this is all by the fifth grade. So they could look at those scores on a reading assessment and then predict that those kids had poor outcomes or behavioral issues or experiences later on in their schooling career. So it's really important that, you know, when we start talking about PBIS at the district level, that we start to think about how are we integrating our academic systems as well. We generally see that with literacy, but you know, you can talk about other academic areas too. So we really know that we have to look at both of these things as far as integrating systems. It's really important that we pull these things together. And so at the SST right now, we're having some initial conversations about what does this look like for school districts? How can we support? And what things can we do that won't crush people? Right now, you guys are in a situation where some of you have been remote, some of you are coming back hybrid, some of you are coming back face-to-face for the first time in a year, which is really kind of a frightening thought. But what are the kind of things that we can layer on that doesn't crush people and that they're able to do? So we're really kind of talking about that at our level. So the other thing that I did want to share with you before we have some of our districts kind of talk about what they're doing at the district level is we're going to talk about Susan Barrett a little bit. And Susan Barrett, if you're not familiar with Susan Barrett, she's done a lot of work as far as integrating systems. And she's done a lot actually with some mental health considerations as well. But when she came several years ago to our PBIS showcase, it was in 2017, she shared this slide, which I will say makes MTSS look really simple, and it's not, but it is, I think it's a great way to think about integrating behavior and academics. She talks about MTSS being an implementation framework. And basically, if you look at the slide, it talks about organizing our resources, which means how are we tiering our supports? What does our system look like? And then doing a gap analysis. In other words, who needs that support? Who do we know that really needs that support, that tiered support? She talks about, so we can help get kids help early. And that is really doing those actions based on what the child needs and not a particular process. So when we have those our things mapped out and we have good assessments, we're able to do that. She also talks about we do stuff that's likely to work. In other words, are we using evidence-based interventions and how do we know that? Are we doing fidelity measures on those evidence-based interventions? Are the adults really implementing those evidence-based interventions with fidelity? And then do the student outcomes show that those are being done and it's working for kids? Then she talks about we provide supports to staff to do it right. We're talking about today the DSFI, but also that's the TFI for buildings. And for those of you implementing reading plans and you have your literacy that you're working on, that would be the RTFI. So there are fidelity measures that we can use to kind of look at that, to look at what we're doing to make sure we're doing what we say we're doing. And then she says, we want to make sure that they're successful. So do we have coaching supports built in so that we can help teachers in the buildings really do these evidence-based interventions and work our system? Are we progress monitoring and providing feedback to adults and children in the building about how they're doing with their academics and behavior? Do we have a problem-solving process? In Ohio, that might be your 5-step process. That might be some Ohio improvement process that you're using. But are we really looking at the data, setting an action step, checking back and seeing if it's working, and then going through that cycle as we look at the issues that we're having in the building, and then increasing levels of intensity. So it's not more of the same, but increasing that intensity if those interventions are working. So I really like the way that she kind of puts this in this form. Again, it sounds really easy the way she has it set up. It's not that easy. But I think it's a great place to start. So are we doing these things? Are we organizing our resources? Are we getting kids help early? Are we using evidence-based interventions? Are we providing supports to the adults in the building? And then are we checking to make sure that they're successful? That's really what the whole framework is about. If you're talking about PBIS, if you're talking about RTI, if you're talking about MTSS. So we wanted to kind of start to kind of plant a seed in your mind, because we know that districts are asking for MTSS support. We know that people are really thinking about how are they integrating those academic supports in their PBIS framework. So we want to kind of plant the seed to have you guys think about that. So I will pause for a second before we jump in, because we're going to hear from some of our districts next. But I will pause for a second if anybody has a comment that they want to put in the chat, or they want to unmute with a question. So I will provide some processing time, and I'll be quiet for a second. And Steph, I would just ask you unmute if there's anything in the chat. I don't know if there is, because I'm not looking at that right now.
Just a shout out from me, Heidi, to you.
Oh, yay.
I just said that this really makes MTSS implementation look so easy when
Yeah.
everyone on this call knows that it's so complex. But what I like about it is this is a PBIS leaders network. And so you guys are the ones probably messaging PBIS and MTSS back in your buildings. And I like that this really kind of organizes the why that this is so important. And it makes it seem manageable. It's a nice way to kind of organize all the efforts around it. So I just thanked you, Heidi, for bringing this back to our attention, because Barrett does such good work, and
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about this until you brought it back up. So.
And I remember being at that conference and being so excited to see this and all the integration pieces that she presented to us, because, you know, we have to be working smarter, not harder, and we cannot be working in silos. And so I think, again, thinking about it in a simple way, and, you know, in actuality, as you said, it's not that easy, but thinking about it, this is really what we're doing for kids when we're implementing MTSS. So I'm sure you guys are done hearing me drone on, and I am as well. So we would like to throw it back to our district. So Steph, is Jen on the call? Okay, so I'm going to first introduce Jen Sutton. Jen Sutton is from Barberton City Schools, and in 2020 they were an award winner for district implementation. And so we're going to have her just kind of talk a little bit about, you know, the benefits and challenges of implementing PBIS at the district level, and some considerations that maybe we should think about as you guys are entering this work. So I am going to throw it over to Jen, if she's on, if she would unmute, and have her talk a little bit about their experiences with doing PBIS at the district level.
Well, hello, good morning. It's definitely been a challenge, and every building runs a little bit different. And I would say just within the building, you have different teams together, and they all kind of mesh differently and run a little bit differently. So some is a little bit easier than others. But a benefit from doing it district-wide is seeing from preschool all the way to high school consistency. And we've really gone all the way back. I mean, we revamped everything several years back to really flow, and everywhere in the district, we have the same 3 R's, and every student from preschool up can recite that, and they know that. And the language, you know, on describing that changed a little bit just to make it more, you know, age friendly. Whereas like preschool, we do more pictures and simple words, and then you make it a little more language heavier the older you get. And we've done also, you know, the social emotional part of that, building it from preschool all the way to high school, and have worked on that. We have really the way I help organize is through the Google Drive. Every building has their own folder, and so we kind of share resources that way. So if they're looking for something specific, like what is another building doing for this area, they can kind of pop in there and see. They share all their TFIs that way, so they can kind of share where they are and kind of like write in the plan what they're planning on how to attack that. And I've started working through their TFI action plans by highlighting things that they would do at certain times of the year, because you revisit those items and just kind of check to see where you are and what can be, you know, done again. Because, you know, if you look at the TFI, you're doing the TFI at a certain time, you're doing the SAS at a certain time. So those kind of items are kind of highlighting in different colors. You might do this during this month or during this quarter, and kind of help them stay organized from a district standpoint, just making sure that they're on track to, for the whole year of doing different things at different checkpoints, basically. And I work with each building and their point person, and then I kind of go in and pop into their meetings and just help facilitate the meeting if they have questions, and then I can share if they aren't sure, well, what is this building doing for this? Since I'm in all the meetings, then I can kind of share. Preschool's been probably the best right now because they're building from ground up. So they'll go, well, what is the elementary doing? And I kind of share, and then they kind of trying to mimic different things to help flow that process and that transition for those kiddos. And they've also been, since we were talking about MTSS, they were doing both simultaneously. So they've actually tied both of them together. And Rachel's on the call, so she can jump in and share if you want to hear anything on that process. It's been awesome to see that development from the ground up, because I did jump in when other buildings were already in development. So I'm kind of seeing this build from the ground up. And it was just a light bulb of, why are we doing two different committees? Like, we'll just tie it all together. So that group is the building leadership team, the MTSS team, PBIS team, tier 1, but now they're kind of just tying that all together. And it is flowing. So just so you don't have so many different groups running all at one time, it does make sense. So I don't know if I shared everything. Stephanie, Michelle, if I'm missing anything I need to share, or Rachel, if you want to share anything.
And Rachel, not to put you on the spot, but would love to hear some takeaways as you guys have integrated both the academic and behavioral systems. I would love to hear, just if you're willing to just share a couple of ahas or barriers or something as you guys have rolled that out. You don't mind to put you
I'd
right
be
on the
happy
spot.
to. When I got to that slide about the MTSS, I was very excited to see that and to hear about it, because that is exactly where we're at right now. We are a little bit unique because this is our 4th year of being open. So we are just building all the systems together. MTSS was very important to us to get started, because that's what I was hearing a lot from the staff, that if we have, troubled areas, we don't want to go straight to, evaluation. We just want supports. We want supports in place that are evidence-based for our students. So we were able to get that up and running. And as we were doing it, it just made sense to have the behavior piece with it. So we are working on our PBIS tier 2 right now. And through that process, we were going back through our MTSS to see what needs added in as far as behavior. And a lot of it was already there. We just did it just from the start, from the get-go. We had the behavior piece in there. We did have the middle school sat in on our last MTSS meeting, and it was really neat to hear their perspective. They really liked seeing how invested we were with each student that came through. And, the one, I think, takeaway for them was that our MTSS team became our PBIS tier 2 team, because that's what made the most sense for us is yes, that committee needs to be on the same page. So our PBIS tier 2 team is different from our tier 1 team. But I like that, because our tier 1 can just solely focus on, PBIS tier 1. And then, like I said, our PBIS tier 2 and our MTSS, we're just, we're going through it together. I mean, I love it.
It shows the importance of having that kind of steering force at the district level, but the importance of the collaboration between the buildings is so exciting,
Yes. Jen is so helpful with that, to be able to, she was the one that had the connection with the middle school and was talking to them about putting the systems together, and just said, hey, why don't you join the MTSS or the preschool meeting? And because it's all virtual right now. So it's not like they even had to, take away time from their buildings. We all just jumped on virtually. And then between teachers of our MTSS meeting, they were able to ask questions, and we talked about the process back and forth.
I think your point too about looking at tier 2, we're having a lot of conversations, and Steph, you can jump in too, because we've had conversations about when you start to develop decision rules, it makes a lot of sense when you're looking at both sides of the triangle. I mean, you know, I just shared some research with you regarding how academics begets behavior later on. It's really important that when you're looking at those decision rules, are you looking at behavior and academics? And now, unfortunately, with the situation we're in, social emotional considerations as kids are coming back to school, and there's going to be issues there as well. So I love the fact that you're starting that tier 2, Rachel, and you're really looking at how all those things are connected, because we're having some conversations with buildings about that right now. Stephanie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that or not, but I know we've had those conversations.
Yeah, and I just continue to be impressed by Jen and Rachel and the work of Barberton. You know, what I love, which seems logical in our brains, but if you really think about a middle school joining a preschool team to hear the conversation and look at the process, it's huge, you guys. And I think in the day-to-day, we just think, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. But I think the benefit of your work for district-wide implementation is it neutralizes all the language. And so now you can look at the process as the process, which is really big progress for you guys as a district to make. And it's a sticking point that we see throughout the region. You know, what these ladies have also not mentioned here is they've done a lot of work to get on a district-wide schedule for when are you going to do the TFI? When are we going to complete self-assessment surveys and how often? And Jen coordinates district level meetings where they're using the 5-step process to look at TFI and Swiss data across the board to see trends, and then also kind of call on each other to say, okay, well, this is a sticky point overall, who's doing this well? And so because of all that work that you guys have done with consistent language, consistent processes, I think it allows people to kind of share ideas really freely. And so it's just so encouraging. And I think you did a good job of sharing both the vision for that consistency, but also a lot of practical little tips, even sharing your organization of the Google Classroom and all that. So just thank you, thank you. I know it's hard to find time to get on a network and share things that you've been working on, but I think it was really beneficial and encouraging.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing some reaction in the chat that reinforces that, Steph. So I'm going to pause for a minute to see if anybody has questions specifically for the Barberton folks. You can unmute or populate the chat because we're going to hear from another district in a second. And you guys are magic. You're the magics and you are magic. If there's any question or comments, I know I saw some comments from Jessica Haynes having, you know, really the point of this is that we are not qualifying students for special education services. We want to make sure we catch them early, intervene early, and make sure that they are being helped by your tier 1 system. And that's exactly right. So oh yeah. And she was saying that, you know, maybe districts can visit each other, which is kind of what we were hoping with this network would happen, really looking at one another and creating a true network so you guys can see what each other is doing. And I think that's really, really important.
And we've been open to preschool because they're running most of their meetings still this year. They've been able to be the most consistent, I think, in the building with everything. So if someone wants to jump in on an MTSS meeting or PBIS meeting, just let me know. It's all Google, so we just connect you in. And it has been awesome doing that. We even actually trialed with an outside preschool that was referring. And when we did a quick glance, we didn't see a need, but the teacher was insistent. So we're doing the MTSS process with them right now and jump them in. And I could see that, you know, going with behavior because we get referrals for behavior. So we could do the same process.
Yep. And I think there are definitely considerations for next year, you guys. I mean, you guys know what this pandemic has done. And unfortunately, it has affected our kids greatly in many different ways. And I think we're all going to need to rethink what our tier 1 supports look like, what our tier 2 supports look like for behavior and academics. And I think if we do that from the district perspective, it's just going to make things easier, effective, and efficient. So thank you so much, Barberton, for sharing. We're going to go ahead and move on to Medina. We have Sarah Jackson with us this morning and Matt Maddie, who are both working at the district level in Medina, and they are an award winner they were actually our first award winner in the region for district implementation. So I would ask them to, again, insights, thoughts, challenges, barriers, big ideas that has come from that district level implementation. And Matt or Sarah, if you want to unmute one of you guys, you can go ahead and tell us what your experience has been with implementing PBIS at the district level.
Well, thanks, Heidi. Good morning, everyone. Sarah and I are going to kind of tag team this morning, but I did want to say I appreciate listening to Barberton's feedback this morning. We've heard so many good things about Barberton from Stephanie and from Heidi over the years, so it's great to hear the work that you're doing. We were recognized in 2019 and had an opportunity to present at the state showcase. And one of the messages we wanted to send our district is because we're being recognized doesn't mean that we are done. In fact, we're just kind of beginning. And it was a good, momentum pusher to know that we were on the right track and that we were doing some good things in the district level and across our buildings. But it certainly was just the beginning, and we're still learning. I think that, like all districts, this past year has been very, very challenging, and our PBIS work has not had the focus that we'd like it to have. So coming off of 2019 and having that recognition, it kind of killed our momentum for a while. And now we're really trying to refocus our efforts and our initiatives around PBIS. So I think a couple of our takeaways, I think the biggest thing is that our district was committed from the very beginning to roll this out in a district level. And we took leadership from the district level from the very beginning. I know some districts look at rolling it out on the building level, and there's different ways of approaching that. We decided to form a district level team right from the start, and we rolled things out incrementally. So we actually took a phased approach, and we've been working on this rollout since about 2015. So around over 6 years. And we really started with our preschool and then a couple of our higher risk buildings, and they really set the groundwork. I see Amanda is on the call here, and she works over at Northrop, which is one of the buildings that led this work. And what we found from the phased in approach, the cohort model is what we called it, is that it really helped with the sustainability of the implementation and also allowed for buildings to share some of their successes and challenges with other buildings. So we really built off of what we learned from year to year. One of the downsides of the phased in model is that by the time we got to the last cohort, which we had 3 different cohorts, we found that there was not as much investment in that last group. And there was a little bit of feeling of, well, we weren't involved with this discussion from the very beginning, and we didn't participate in setting up these procedures, and we didn't participate in establishing our non-negotiables, the language that we use. And so we had to work through that. I think in retrospect, if I were doing this over, I would make sure that I included those building principles from the very beginning, even if they weren't in their implementation year or their training year, that they would still be part of that discussion. So that's just one kind of takeaway looking back. The other thing that was really important to us is that we tied this into our district leadership team goal. So PBIS was part of our DLT goal, and we were looking at reducing suspensions, increasing attendance, and then we were using the TFI as a measure. And we had set a goal that by 2020, we would have 70% implementation across all buildings in Tier 1 and Tier 2. We're not quite there yet, but again, that momentum kind of was halted this year. The other thing that I think was important is that our district internal coordinators, so that would be me and Sarah and Rhonda French, who's in our People Services office, we attend the building PBIS meetings. So we believe it's important for us to be involved on the building level and to have that streamlined communication. We also focused on professional development, coaching, and training. Heidi was talking about that earlier, across the district. And we would do that as we rolled out. So the year before implementation, a building would attend SST8 trainings, and that would serve as kind of the foundation for professional development as they moved into their implementation year. We also provided targeted support based on the SAS and the TFI. So we really looked at which buildings were successful, which buildings were still having some challenges based on that data. And we were able to target some professional development support. For example, we had one building that it was obvious that trauma-informed care and restorative practices really needed to be a focus. And we made that happen. We developed a year-long professional development plan that focused specifically on those pieces. And Sarah, please jump in if there's anything you want to add as I'm walking through this. The other piece that was important is having district level data discussions. And as a PBIS team on the district level, we looked at student behavior because we collected student behavior data on the district level. Each building had a shared form with us, and some buildings use Swiss, and actually we're at the point now where we're going to move forward with implementing Swiss across the district. But a couple of years ago, we were at the point where we were using Google Forms in most buildings and Swiss in some buildings. But we did take the time and make it a priority to analyze student behavior data on a district level, in addition to reviewing the TFIs. Each spring, we would go into buildings and conduct walkthroughs, and we'd complete TFIs, as I said, as internal coordinators with the building level PBIS team. And then we'd bring all that data back to the district level team in the spring and analyze and discuss that. We also tried to embed, and I can't take credit for this, this is really the work of Amanda and Gretchen, who is at Garfield as an intern at the time. We tried to embed our data discussion protocol through the Ohio improvement process. So we use the 5-step model as sort of a framework and a protocol for our data discussions on the building level and then on the district level as well.
And I would just add, the work that you guys have done with 5-step is really incredible. It's kind of a model for the region. So if anyone on the call has questions, I'll throw Matt right under the bus and say, maybe you could ask him, but you guys, and Gretchen too, I know has done a lot of work with that. It is amazing what you guys have done with the behavioral data with the Ohio 5-step process. So I would just reinforce by saying that. And Stephanie, I don't know, I know you've worked with them too. I don't know if you have anything to add as far as anything that Matt said, but definitely the data discussions are really impressive.
And I think that was a lesson learned, you know, as I think back, and boy, Matt, as you're walking through this, I remember how much focus and work and strategy you guys put into how you were approaching this as a district. And what's coming to mind is early on, those district level meetings were kind of a share out approach for your buildings. And what we found was the data made those conversations a little bit more structured and a little bit more focused. And so that was my outside opinion looking in. So Sarah, Matt, and Amanda, please agree or disagree with me. But as a coach, what I liked about that data protocol is it really just eliminated, okay, everyone, let's go around the room and talk about what's going well or where we're stuck. Right. And it really used those TFI and Swiss data or your discipline data to really identify the areas for prioritized discussion. And we know that, you know, as you looked at certain areas of the TFI or SAS or whatever data you were looking at the time, because by the way, you have a lot of data available, which is also impressive in it at itself that you guys made an effort to do district-wide consistent data measures. But it really allowed teams then to have a focused conversation, but then it prompted so much more collaboration moving forward. And so I think that move for strategizing using data was really a game changer from the outside looking in. I felt that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point that we didn't start looking at district level data for the first couple of years. We had to learn that lesson the hard way. And like Stephanie said, we did spend a lot of time at district level meetings just going around the table. And although that can be effective, it really wasn't moving our work forward. And it really was just emphasizing the differences between the buildings and the fact that we were struggling with getting that consistency. So, excuse me. So the data really provided some structure for us.
Just building off of what Matt and Stephanie had said, you know, our next steps as a district is trying to create better structure so we can now analyze our district level data in a different way. So as I think Matt kind of hinted at, we are looking at exploring a district-wide data collection system like Swiss so we can have those conversations to continue to allow both the fidelity implementation data that we're collecting and student data to really be our guide moving forward. And I give a lot of credit to Matt because he said I wasn't with the district when these structures were put in place, but they are still what we lean on to support PBIS moving forward, and continually updating it. So I think Matt's opening comment is that we're always evolving the system based on what the data is telling us and what we're learning as we have buildings move into tier 2, tier 3 implementation. And even this past year as a district, we wanted to ensure that PBIS continued to be a priority. So as we started work to develop our portrait of a graduate, it was natural for us to think about the implications and links to what we're doing in PBIS. As we revamped our MTSS process last year, again, it was very natural for us to link that right into the systems and structures we have in place. So we really tried to integrate our work to ensure that what we have built from the foundation we have in PBIS continues to be the structures we move forward.
Yeah, I would just add a couple of final thoughts here. One thing that was really beneficial was having a consistent ODR across the district. We do have a district office discipline referral form, and we started out with paper just for the purpose of clean data entry. And we started to kind of move with our middle schools taking the lead to more of an online approach. But really the key is the consistency there. And then also we were able to build from that major and minor behavior descriptors that were normed by grade band. So we took a look at our handbook language and we made sure that we calibrated our elementary buildings, our middle school and high school, so that those behavior descriptors, the major and minor behavior descriptors were consistent. And of course, we had the consistent behavioral expectations. In our case, it's be ready, be responsible, and be respectful. And then finally, just a couple of challenges, and these are probably challenges that Barberton can attest to as well. There's really 4 main implementation challenges that come to mind for me, and that would be equity, alignment, consistency, and shifting staffing mindsets. And I think we all know where we're at with equity in public education right now and the struggle with that. So that's kind of number 1. The alignment between buildings is a challenge. Anytime you're working with a large district, in our case, it's 11 buildings and a preschool, to create those procedures and create that alignment was very challenging. And then comes with alignment, the consistency piece. So something as simple as a as a consistent ODR form sounds like it should be manageable, but those discussions become very robust at times. So we found that that was a challenge as well. And the biggest thing was staff disposition, just trying to get staff to shift their mindset around the philosophy, but also the efficacy of this framework, and realizing that it's not a program, it's not replacing something, it's really trying to pull together all of our resources to be efficient and be successful and be data informed. So that is still a struggle. Amanda, I'm sure you have gone through that as well on the building level, trying to shift staff mindsets, and that takes time. So, so thanks for the opportunity to share, Stephanie.
Oh, and thank you guys for coming and sharing. I mean, the power in this work is how you guys learn from each other. You know, Stephanie and I and Stacy and Michelle can stand up here and talk all day long, but you guys are in the trenches doing the real work. So we really appreciate it when you guys take time to share. It's beneficial for everybody. So I'm going to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions for Medina or Barberton for that matter in the chat, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask them questions. So I'll give some wait time. It's always hard on these calls because there's like a lag. And I hate that quiet time. It makes me crazy. Well, I think Matt's point is well taken. Something as simple as an ODR form and thinking, oh, that's going to be easy. It's kind of like Susan Barrett's kind of frame for MTSS. Sounds really easy, but when you get down to brass tacks, it's a little bit more difficult because there are mindsets to shift. There are procedures to put in place. There are processes to put in place. There's data to collect. So I think that's really important to think about. It looks easy on paper, but in implementation, it's not as easy for sure. Well, we're going to go ahead and continue. And then when we end, if there are questions, we can take them again at the end. I want to thank definitely Barberton, Rachel and Jen, and definitely Medina, Sarah and Matt for coming on and sharing their practices. You guys are, I'll plant a seed. You guys are our first award winners for districts. So maybe looking at the district systems fidelity inventory might be something that you want to do. Maybe we start with you guys there, and that would be something really exciting for the district, for the region. And again, we will be looking for districts next year to do that pilot, to pilot the tool again. So we will, if there are no, I don't see anything in the chat, and nobody unmuted, but we'll give time again at the end if people have questions. So what we would like to hear from you, kind of for us as a data collection, is what are you guys doing currently at the district level? If you guys have practices that you're using, if you could post them on our idea boards, and I'll give them just a minute for that. And if people want to do that after the fact, we can kind of wrap up and do that. But this idea boards is, it's just an interactive whiteboard. And we would like, if you're doing something special, or if you're doing something that you think might benefit somebody else, to go ahead and put those district practices on there. If you're consistently doing TFI, or if you are, if you have an action plan at the district level, if you're looking at district level data, or if there's some of those considerations, we would ask you to go ahead and populate that as a benefit to our whole region. If you would go ahead and do that. And I know we're almost at time. We started a couple minutes. We only really have a couple more things to cover. If you have to log off at 10, we understand. I know we started a couple minutes late, so we're probably going to go a couple minutes over, and I apologize for that. So if you would populate some ideas, if you have some district practices that might be beneficial to others, we would ask you to populate the idea boards. And in the interest of time, as you're doing that, we're going to go through our last couple of slides for you today. And Steph did put the link in the chat if you need for the idea boards, and we'll come back to networking. So as we wrap up, we want to remind you, we have our podcast that we're really proud of, and it's been a labor of love for a lot of us. We have finished our first season of PBIS, and we are now into our second season of literacy. Stephanie Martinez on the call did participate in one of our first, in the first season in one of our podcasts regarding relationships and some of the restorative practices, considerations, and all that. And so we would remind you that we do have that. The first one for literacy, the first podcast of the season was an interview with Natalie Wexler, and the second one was a continuation of that interview. So we would ask that if you're interested in listening to what the science of reading and some other things and some other interviews that we're having, that you go ahead and check out our podcast. And then finally, we have some upcoming trainings. If you're interested, we are offering an overview, and we always do have the effective classroom practices on demand. The one thing I did want to finish with, because it is a change for next month. Yay, yeah, I know. Yay. Thank you, Stephanie. We were so proud of it, our season one. We are having a little bit of having a change for next month, and I'm excited about why we're having a change. Next month, our Leaders Network was supposed to be on April 14th in the morning. It is now going to be April 13th in the afternoon. And what we're doing is we're having a cross collaboration with Region 11, which is like Central Ohio, the Columbus area. And we're going to have two districts present. Brunswick is going to be one about what they're doing a little bit in Tier 2. And then there is also there's going to be another presentation by somebody from a school in Region 11. And I've already seen this person present, and it's phenomenal with what they're doing in Tier 2. I have to tell you, if you can join on, please do. But it's going to be a cross network. It's going to be like our network, but it's going to be 2 hours, and it's going to be with our region and other regions. So the registration is updated. I will warn you, the registration is kind of wonky. You're going to have to register on our website. That's going to generate an email. In that email, it's going to be a Zoom registration, so you're going to have to kind of register twice. We apologize for that, but that's the way the system is going to have to work this time. So you register with us, you'll get an email with the Zoom registration, you'll register on Zoom, and that will give you a link to that networking meeting. So I'm not sure if we have anything that we need to talk about as far as the Ide Boardz is concerned. If those were populated, we're going to kind of wrap up, and I'll just throw it out as we wrap up also to Stephanie Martinez, as she kind of sat with us today, not to put you on the spot, Stephanie, but any thoughts from your perspective in Florida and what you're doing with the center there as far as district level implementation or MTSS connections that you'd want to throw in as we wrap up?
I guess the big thing is a lot of our districts start really focusing on tier 1, and then they get that down, and then it's, okay, how do we tackle our supports at tier 2? And so I put one of the things in the Ide Boardz is that we're having some of our districts now thinking exactly what Matt said, about instead of just district-wide tier 1 ODRs, but like district-wide universal screening. So they're using the same universal screening tool, K through 3, and then 4 through 12, so they can look at the data district-wide and individual school, and they use the same schedule of it. So just like what Maddie was saying about tier 1, tier 2, I would say, when you're ready, that's another good one. Just try to get some consistency across school with practices.